All right, let's dive into some fascinating ideas about life, death, and the intricate connections between parents and children.
It's always a good topic.
Always. Um, we're going to be looking at excerpts from a discussion on the afterlife, specifically drawing from Indian perspectives and yogic lore.
Oh, very cool.
Now, before we jump in, it's important to note this isn't like a scientific study or a historical text. We're dealing with cultural and spiritual beliefs here. So think of it as expanding our understanding of how different cultures view these profound topics.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, I think. It's about opening ourselves up to different ways of thinking about death and the bonds we share with our loved ones, even beyond the physical realm.
Right. So our mission today is to see how these concepts might challenge our usual assumptions. One of the first things that really caught my eye was this emphasis on the role of sons, and to some extent daughters after a parent dies. The source mentions that traditionally in India, having a son was seen as crucial for post-death rituals.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about fulfilling, familial duties or anything like that. It stems from this belief in a deeper energetic connection between a parent and child, one that becomes especially potent at the moment of death.
So it's not just about mourning and remembering, but about an active role that children play in the parent's journey after death.
Exactly. And this connection is believed to be something tangible and usable during rituals to help the deceased parent transition to the afterlife.
Okay, so that's so different from how death is often viewed in Western cultures. It's not just about mourning and remembering, but about an active practical role that children, and specifically sons, play in the parent's journey after death.
Exactly. And while daughters were also considered important, logistical realities often prevented them from being as involved.
Right, makes sense.
Imagine in those times, travel was difficult, families were spread out, and daughters often had their own households and duties to manage.
So it wasn't that daughters were less connected, but more about the limitations of the time.
Right.
But this whole concept of an energetic connection that's usable, that's what I find fascinating. Like having a cell phone connection to the other side.
Really does challenge our typical understanding of death, doesn't it?
It does.
And it ties into another point that I found interesting, which is this idea of a physiological link between parent and child. The source uses this phrase, "You provide the body, but you don't create the being."
Whoa, that's a powerful statement. What exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it this way. You as the parent provide the physical vessel, the body, for your child, but you don't create their soul or essence. And when that essence fully anchors into the body around the age of 4, it creates an energetic imprint on you, the parent.
Oh, wow. That makes you think about all those times parents say they don't recognize their teenagers anymore. Is that because of this, fading energetic link?
You're definitely onto something. The source points out that this link is strongest until the child reaches the age of 21. After that, it starts to dissipate.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's almost like you have this intense connection with your child for those first 21 years, and then it's like they're off on their own energetic journey, becoming more independent, and not just physically, but on this deeper level too.
Exactly, and it works both ways.
Right.
While your energetic abode within them fades, theirs within you remains.
So it becomes more one-sided.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is where it gets really wild. The source mentions that in India, skilled energy readers or astrologers could often perceive this imprint. They could tell if someone had children, how many, even some of their characteristics, just by sensing this energetic signature.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Imagine being able to glean that kind of information just from someone's energy field.
Yeah.
It suggests this level of interconnectedness that we're only beginning to understand.
Have you ever encountered anything like that in your own life?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt this energetic connection with your children or sensed it in other people?
I've always been sensitive to energy, and I've definitely noticed shifts in the dynamics with my own children as they've gotten older. There's a palpable difference in the energetic connection, especially after they cross that 21-year mark.
Interesting. It's almost like a biological and energetic coming of age, not just for the child, but for the parent as well.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a transformation for both parties, a recognition of this new chapter in the relationship, both physically and energetically.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about death anniversaries. Most people view them as a time for remembrance, but the source suggests there's a deeper purpose at play.
Yes, it goes beyond simply honoring the memory of the deceased. It's about actively engaging in a process of gradually distancing yourself from your ancestral lineage. The source calls this weakening the grip of genetic memory.
Genetic memory.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? I find that concept incredibly intriguing.
Of course. It's this idea that we inherit not just physical traits from our ancestors, but also patterns of behavior tendencies, even karmic imprints. And these patterns can play out in our lives, unconsciously influencing our choices and reactions. It's like we're following an invisible script.
So it's not just about remembering our ancestors, but about understanding how their legacy, both positive and negative, might be influencing us in the present.
Exactly. And without this conscious effort to distance ourselves, we risk becoming trapped in what the Source calls a cyclical process, repeating the same patterns and challenges faced by those who came before us.
So how does one go about distancing themselves from these ancestral patterns? Is it about rejecting our family history?
It's not about rejection, but about awareness and conscious choice. The Source doesn't delve into specific methods, but it suggests that these death anniversaries offer a powerful opportunity for reflection and for making a conscious effort to break free from those patterns.
That's a powerful reframing of how we view these anniversaries. It's not just about looking back, but about looking forward and taking control of our destinies. It's like consciously rewriting the script of our lives.
I like that analogy. It captures the essence of what the Source is suggesting. It's about acknowledging the influence of the past while empowering ourselves to create a future that is truly our own.
You know, this concept of genetic memory really resonated with me. I have a history of anxiety in my own family that seems to have been passed down through generations, and I've always wondered if it's something I'm predisposed to or if it's just learned behavior. But this idea of genetic memory gives me like a new framework for understanding that.
It's fascinating how these ancient concepts can offer such relevant insights into our modern lives, isn't it? And it speaks to the interconnectedness of everything. We are not isolated individuals. We carry the legacy of our ancestors within us, and understanding that legacy can be a powerful tool for growth and transformation.
Absolutely. It's like having a hidden map that can guide us towards greater self-awareness and freedom. Speaking of ancestral influence, I'm curious about the idea of ancestor worship, which is prevalent in so many cultures. How does that fit into this framework of either caring for the deceased or creating distance?
That's a great question, and one that highlights the diversity of cultural beliefs surrounding death and the afterlife. You know, it's true that some cultures venerate ancestors seeking their guidance and protection, but in India, the emphasis is more on either taking care of the deceased through rituals or creating distance, as we've been discussing.
Why do you think there's such a difference in approach? What factors might have contributed to these divergent beliefs?
Well, it's difficult to pinpoint the exact reasons, but the Source offers an interesting perspective. It speculates that the prevalence of occult practices in other cultures might have led to genuine experiences of ancestral help, solidifying the belief in their continued involvement and the importance of seeking their guidance.
So it's possible that different cultural practices led to different types of experiences, which then shaped the beliefs that were passed down through generations.
Exactly. It highlights this powerful interplay between experience and belief. And in India, the spiritual practices have historically been more focused on individual liberation and transcendence, which might explain the emphasis on distancing oneself from ancestral influences.
That makes sense. It's like each culture developed its own unique approach to navigating the mysteries of life and death, based on their own experiences and spiritual understandings.
Precisely. And there's no one right way to approach these profound topics. It's about being open to exploring different perspectives and finding what resonates with us on a personal level.
I love that open-minded approach.
Yeah.
And speaking of individual experiences impacting descendants, there's that quote where the speaker himself talks about his own post-death presence for 80 years.
Yes, that particular passage always stood out to me. It suggests that while ancestor worship might not be the norm in this tradition, there's still an acknowledgement that certain individuals, through their spiritual attainment or the intensity of their life force, can leave a lasting energetic imprint that extends beyond their physical death.
It's like a ripple effect. Their energy continues to influence the world and those around them even after they're gone.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder about the lasting impact we each have on the world and on future generations.
It does, and it raises so many questions. What kind of imprint are we leaving behind? How can we cultivate a positive influence that will continue to benefit others even after we're gone?
Those are profound questions worth pondering. And it brings us to a topic that I think often sparks a lot of debate, heaven and hell.
Ah, yes, the eternal destinations of the afterlife. I'm always fascinated by how different cultures envision these realms.
Well, the Source doesn't hold back. It calls those traditional ideas fairy tales, outdated in our intellectual age.
Whoa, that's a bold statement. I'm curious to hear their reasoning.
They argue that as our understanding of consciousness and the nature of reality evolves, those concepts are increasingly being questioned. The idea of heaven and hell as literal places is likely more symbolic than factual.
I can see how these concepts might seem overly simplistic in light of our expanding knowledge. So if they're not literal places, then what do they represent? What's the point of these concepts, if not as actual destinations?
The source suggests they represent states of being, states of pleasantness or unpleasantness that our consciousness can experience after death, shaped by the karmic consequences of our actions during life.
So it's not about divine judgment or reward and punishment, but about the natural consequences of our actions continuing to shape our experience, even after we're gone.
Exactly. It's like our actions create this energetic blueprint that continues to influence our journey, even after we shed the physical body.
That's a fascinating perspective. It shifts the focus from external judgment to internal responsibility. It's about recognizing that we are ultimately responsible for shaping the quality of our experience, both in this life and beyond.
I find that incredibly empowering. It means that we have a lot more agency than we might realize. Our choices matter, not just for our present well-being, but for our continued evolution even after death.
I completely agree. It invites us to live more consciously, knowing that our actions have far-reaching consequences. And it makes you wonder about the impact of our collective choices on the overall evolution of consciousness.
That's a profound thought. And the source actually goes on to suggest that as these traditional beliefs fade, people will seek to maximize pleasure in the here and now, often turning to external means like substances.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. It raises concerns about the potential consequences of this shift in focus, from the afterlife to the immediate gratification of the present moment.
Exactly. And it's not presented as a moral judgment, but as a concern for human potential.
Right, it's not about condemning certain choices, but about recognizing the potential impact on our individual and collective evolution.
The source actually calls this trend a crime against humanity. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. It highlights the gravity of this issue. The concern is that relying on these chemical enhancements as a crutch prevents us from exploring and developing our innate capacity for joy and bliss.
It's like we're trading long-term fulfillment for this quick fix, and in doing so, we're potentially diminishing our capacity for genuine happiness.
Precisely. And if we become dependent on these external substances to experience well-being, what does that mean for future generations? Are we passing on this diminished capacity for joy and inner peace?
It's a sobering thought. It makes you wonder about the choices we're making today and the legacy we're leaving behind. If lasting well-being isn't found in these external things, where do we find it? What's the alternative to this chemical dependence?
This is where the yogic perspective comes in, offering this path beyond duality, beyond this limited framework of heaven and hell, good and bad, pleasure and pain. It's about cultivating inner well-being that doesn't rely on those external fixes.
I think this anecdote about the 84-year-old yogi perfectly illustrates that point. He's confidently claiming he's going to heaven, but not because of God's favor, because of his own internal state.
It's a great example. It highlights the yogic goal to cultivate this state of inner pleasantness regardless of external circumstances.
So it's not about earning a spot in a blissful afterlife, but about mastering our inner world right now in this life.
Exactly. And that mastery, that inner transformation, is what ultimately leads to true liberation or mukti, which is about dissolving all limitations, not seeking a specific destination.
Wow, that's a powerful concept. It really flips the script on how we think about both life and death.
It does, and it challenges us to consider this more profound possibility. What if the key to a fulfilling afterlife isn't about earning a reward, but about cultivating a state of being that transcends the limitations of our current experience?
That's definitely something to think about. This is already making me reevaluate some of my own beliefs about life, death, and the choices I make every day.
It's amazing how these ancient teachings can still feel so relevant and offer such profound insights into the human experience.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored this unique Indian perspective on the afterlife, from the role of children to this concept of genetic memory and the potential pitfalls of seeking external fixes for inner fulfillment.
Right? It's fascinating.
It's been a fascinating journey so far, but we're not done yet. We have a lot more to uncover in part 2 of our deep dives, including a deeper look at the yogic perspective on life and death.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Welcome back. I'm eager to dive a little deeper into this material with you and see what other gems we can uncover.
Me too. There's so much to unpack. Before we jump back into those specific excerpts, so I have a question for you. Based on all these different ideas that we're discussing, what's your personal take on the whole concept of heaven and hell?
That's a great question. And honestly, my views have evolved over time. I used to think of heaven and hell as very literal places, like destinations you'd reach after death. but now I see them more as states of being. It's less about where you go and more about the quality of your consciousness.
So it's not about fire and brimstone or pearly gates, but about your internal state.
Exactly. It's about the karmic baggage you carry, the attachments you cling to, the unresolved issues that weigh you down. Those things, I believe, create the conditions for what we might call heaven or hell.
That makes a lot of sense. And it ties into what the Source was saying about people seeking pleasure in the here and now, often through substances. It's like they're trying to create a temporary heaven through external means.
Yeah, and that's where the danger lies, because true lasting happiness can't be found in external things. It has to come from within.
The Source was pretty blunt about that, calling it a crime against humanity. It's a strong statement.
It is, but I think it speaks to the potential consequences of this trend. You know, if we become reliant on substances to feel good, we're essentially outsourcing our happiness. And what happens when those substances are no longer available or when they stop working?
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It's like we're becoming addicted to a temporary fix without addressing the underlying issues.
Precisely. And it raises questions about what we're passing on to future generations. Are we creating a world where people are less and less equipped to find genuine happiness and fulfillment within themselves?
It's a sobering thought. But thankfully, the Source doesn't just present the problem, it also offers a solution.
Yeah.
And that's where this yogic perspective comes in.
Yes, this is where it gets really exciting, because yoga isn't just about physical postures. It's a holistic system for cultivating inner well-being, for mastering your mind and emotions, for transcending the limitations of your ego.
And that's how you achieve mukti, that true liberation we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Mukti isn't about escaping to some heavenly realm. It's about dissolving the boundaries that keep you feeling separate, limited, and stuck in suffering. It's about realizing your true nature, which is pure consciousness, unbounded joy, and limitless potential.
That sounds incredible, but also kind of abstract.
Yeah.
Are there specific yogic practices that people can do to cultivate this inner well-being?
Absolutely. There are so many practices, and what works best will vary from person to person, but some of the core practices include meditation, breathing exercises, ethical living, and self-reflection.
So it's not just about sitting on a cushion and chanting Om. It's about living in a way that aligns with your highest values and cultivating awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and actions.
Exactly. And when you practice these things consistently over time, you start to shift your internal state. You become more peaceful, more joyful, more resilient in the face of challenges. You're less reactive, less caught up in the drama of your mind.
It's like you're rewiring your brain for happiness.
That's a great way to put it. And the more you cultivate this inner state of well-being, the less you need to rely on external things to feel good. You become your own source of joy.
I love that. It's like you're taking back your power, your ability to create your own happiness. But I have a question. The Source talked about the importance of distancing oneself from ancestral patterns. Does that conflict with the idea of ancestor worship?
That's an insightful question. And it's true that in some cultures, ancestor worship is a central part of spiritual practice. But even within those traditions, the emphasis is often on honoring and learning from your ancestors, not on being bound by their limitations.
So it's about taking the wisdom and the lessons from the past, but not letting them dictate your future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you are a unique individual with your own path to forge. And while your ancestors may have played a role in shaping who you are, you have the power to choose what you do with that legacy.
It's like they're giving you a starting point, but you get to decide where to go from there.
I like that analogy. It's about taking the best of what they offered and building on it, creating something new and beautiful.
And that brings us back to the idea of genetic memory. If we inherit these patterns from our ancestors, both positive and negative, can we also pass on positive traits and tendencies to future generations?
That's a fascinating question. And while the Source doesn't explicitly address it, I believe it's possible. Just as we can inherit negative patterns, we can also inherit positive ones. And by cultivating those positive qualities within ourselves, things like kindness, compassion, wisdom, we're essentially creating a new legacy for our descendants.
That's a beautiful thought. It's like we're not just responsible for our own evolution, but for the evolution of consciousness as a whole.
Absolutely. And it circles back to the importance of conscious living, of making choices that not only benefit ourselves, but also contribute to the well-being of others, both in the present and in the future.
This whole conversation is really making me think about the ripple effects of our actions. It's like each choice we make sends out a ripple that can impact the world in ways we may never fully comprehend.
That's a powerful image. And it reminds us that we're all interconnected, that our lives are interwoven in this vast tapestry of cause and effect.
It's both humbling and empowering, isn't it? to think that we have this capacity to create such positive change, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
It is, and it underscores the importance of cultivating awareness, of making choices that are aligned with our highest values, and of living with intention and purpose.
This deep dive is really challenging me to step up my game. I'm starting to see the potential for growth and transformation in every moment.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. That's the beauty of exploring these profound topics. They invite us to expand our perspective, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the possibilities for greater awareness and fulfillment.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of reality and discovering a whole new world of possibilities within ourselves and in the universe around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think that sense of wonder and discovery is essential for living a truly meaningful life.
We've covered so much ground today, from the energetic connections between parents and children to the concept of genetic memory, the nature of heaven and hell, the potential pitfalls of substance dependence, and the transformative power of yogic practices. It's been a whirlwind of insights.
It has been. We've journeyed through ancient wisdom traditions, explored the mysteries of life and death, and contemplated the vast potential of human consciousness.
And through it all, I keep coming back to this idea of personal responsibility, of making conscious choices that not only shape our own lives, but also contribute to the evolution of consciousness as a whole.
I agree. That's the thread that weaves through all of these concepts. The understanding that we have the power to choose our path, to create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.
And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some of the practical implications of these ideas and delve into what it truly means to live a conscious and meaningful life. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into life, death, and the intricate connections between parents and children. We've covered a lot of ground already, from those potent energetic links to the challenge of breaking free from those ancestral patterns, and even that yogic perspective on transcending those limited ideas of heaven and hell.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has. And as we move into this final part, I'm curious to explore how all of this translates into practical action. What can we as individuals do with this knowledge?
That's the key question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand these ideas intellectually, but it's another to actually embody them, to live them out in our daily lives.
So where do we even begin? If we want to cultivate that inner peace, that mukti you talked about, what are some tangible steps we can take?
Yeah. Well, the source doesn't offer a step-by-step guide,
Right.
but it does highlight the importance of conscious evolution. It's about becoming more aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, and the impact they have on ourselves and the world around us.
Right. It's like laying a foundation of self-awareness. But then what do we do with that awareness?
That's where those yogic practices we discussed come in. Practices like meditation, mindfulness, and ethical living are not just abstract concepts, they're tools for transforming our inner landscape.
So if I'm feeling stuck in a negative pattern, or if I'm struggling with anxiety, or if I'm just feeling lost and disconnected, these practices can help me shift my state of being.
Exactly. Think of them as a way to retrain your mind, to cultivate a sense of inner peace and stability.
You know, it's interesting. The source talks about how the next few decades will be crucial in determining whether humanity embraces this path of conscious evolution or falls deeper into chemical dependence. It almost feels like this call to action, a sense of urgency.
I agree. There's a real sense of urgency in these teachings, a recognition that we're at a crossroads. The choices we make now, individually and collectively, will have a profound impact on the future.
It's almost like we're being given a choice. Do we want to create a world where people are increasingly reliant on external fixes for their happiness? Or do we want to cultivate a world where people are empowered to find true fulfillment from within?
And it's not just about our own happiness either. It's about the legacy we leave behind. What kind of world are we creating for future generations?
It's a big question. And it makes me wonder about the role of parenting in all of this. If we want our children to grow up to be, happy, well-adjusted adults capable of navigating the challenges of life, what can we do as parents to support their development?
That's a crucial question. And while the source doesn't explicitly focus on parenting, I think there are several key takeaways that can be applied to raising children. First and foremost, it's about modeling the behavior we want to see in our children.
So if we want our kids to be kind, compassionate, and resilient, we need to embody those qualities ourselves.
Exactly. Children learn by watching us. They're like these little sponges absorbing everything they see and hear.
That makes me think about all those times I've snapped at my kids when I was feeling stressed or impatient.
Yeah.
I'm basically teaching them that it's okay to react that way.
We all make mistakes as parents. The key is to be aware of our own patterns and to strive to do better.
And what about this whole concept of genetic memory? If we're passing on these patterns, both positive and negative, to our children, How can we break this cycle of negativity and create a more positive legacy?
That's where this idea of conscious evolution comes in. It's about becoming aware of our own inherited patterns and making a conscious effort to shift them. If we're aware that we have a tendency towards anxiety, for example, we can start to work on managing our stress and developing healthier coping mechanisms. And by doing that work, we're not only improving our own lives, but also creating a new blueprint for our children.
So it's not about erasing the past, but about learning from it and making conscious choices to create a better future.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we have the power to change the trajectory of our lives and the lives of our children.
This is all so empowering. It's like we're not just victims of circumstance or genetics. We have the power to choose to grow, to evolve.
And that choice is available to us in every moment. Even the smallest actions can have a ripple effect. A kind word, a helping hand, a moment of mindfulness. These things can shift the energy, not just within ourselves, but in the world around us.
Right. It's like we're all contributing to this collective evolution of consciousness. And the more of us who choose to embrace this path of conscious living, the more positive change we can create.
Exactly. And it starts with each one of us. The choices we make, the thoughts we cultivate, the actions we take, they all matter.
Well, I'm feeling so inspired right now. This deep dive has been such a powerful reminder of our potential, both individually and collectively.
I feel it too. It's like a reawakening, a call to step into our power and create a world that is more aligned with our highest values.
I think we've covered just about everything in this deep dive.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, if there's one thing I hope listeners take away from this conversation, it's that they are not alone. We're all in this together, navigating the mysteries of life and death, striving to find meaning and purpose, and working to create a better future. And while the journey may have its challenges, it's also filled with incredible beauty, potential, and love.
That's a beautiful message to end on. And I want to echo that sentiment of interconnectedness. We're all in this together, and we have the power to create something truly extraordinary. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. What choices will you make today to cultivate greater awareness, inner peace, and positive change in your own life and in the world?
That's a wonderful question to reflect on. And remember, every small step counts. Every act of kindness, every moment of mindfulness, every choice that aligns with your highest values, all makes a difference.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and that it's sparked some new insights and inspiration. Until next time.